Your only true competitor is yourself. And most people never realize how freeing and empowering that truth is. For most of our lives, we are conditioned to compare from school to work to social media. We are constantly shown where someone else is and invited, sometimes unconsciously, to measure our worth against theirs. But focusing on others distracts you from the real work, becoming a better version of the person you were yesterday. When you shift your attention inward, you unlock a level of clarity and purpose that comparison will never give you. When you see yourself as your own competitor, you stop blaming circumstances, people, or conditions. You begin to take ownership of your growth. You recognize that improving your mindset, discipline, habits, and decisions has a direct effect on the results you produce. Instead of trying to outrun someone else's pace, you begin setting your own standard. Competition becomes internal, not external, and that is where true transformation begins. Many people never achieve greatness because they are so focused on watching others that they never build anything themselves. They spend time scrolling through the results of others instead of constructing their own. They invest emotional energy into comparisons instead of progress. But when you stop looking outward and start working inward, your life begins to shift in ways that others can't understand. You begin to realize that the race you're running is personal, unique, and cannot be judged by anyone else's timeline. This mindset eliminates unnecessary stress. When you stop trying to keep up with someone else's accomplishments, you allow yourself to grow at the pace that fits your journey. Some run fast early, some grow slow and then accelerate, some start late and still win big. When you understand this, you stop feeling behind. You're only behind if you're behind the person you were meant to become. Competing with yourself also creates focus. It forces you to look at your weaknesses, your strengths, your habits, and your choices without distraction. You begin asking questions like, did I give more effort today than yesterday? Did I learn something new? Did I follow through on my commitments? These questions move your attention away from pointless comparison and toward intentional development. When you make yourself the benchmark, you start noticing small improvements that others might miss. Maybe you woke up earlier, completed a task you've been avoiding, or made a decision with more confidence than before. These small victories compound, they build momentum, they help you see that growth doesn't always look dramatic, but it is always meaningful. By focusing on being better than your previous self, you shift your mindset from competing to win to competing to grow. Winning can be temporary, growth is permanent. Winning can depend on someone else losing. Growth is completely within your control. When growth becomes the target, life becomes a continuous cycle of improvement and self-elevation. This perspective also protects your peace. Comparison often leads to envy, insecurity, and frustration. You begin to feel inadequate, not because you're not progressing, but because someone else is progressing faster. When you stop playing that game, you reclaim your emotional stability. You begin to applaud others without diminishing yourself. You realize their success is not a threat to yours because you are not racing the same opponent. Competition with yourself demands honesty. It requires you to acknowledge your excuses, limitations, and patterns. When you hold yourself accountable, your self-awareness grows. You begin to understand why you do what you do. And the more aware you become, the more capable you are of changing what holds you back. That is where real power begins. Many people don't improve because they don't measure themselves. They only judge success based on outcomes, ignoring the process. But when you see yourself as your competitor, you begin measuring the right things. Did you progress? Did you try? Did you apply discipline? Did you push your limits? These measurements lead to breakthroughs that external validation never will. When you internalize the truth that you are your only real competitor, you no longer fear others succeeding. Their success becomes evidence that growth is possible. Instead of resentment, you gain inspiration. Instead of feeling threatened, you feel encouraged. You begin to embrace the idea that if someone else can rise, you can too, as long as you are willing to elevate your own standards. This mindset also teaches patience. Growth is rarely instant. Personal transformation is built day by day, habit by habit, decision by decision. When you stop competing with the world, you stop rushing the process. You learn to trust that showing up consistently, even when the results are not visible yet, is still moving you forward. The invisible days are often the most important ones. Competing with yourself also creates resilience. When you fall short, you don't quit in shame. You analyze, adjust, and continue. Failure becomes feedback instead of final judgment. Because the competition is internal, setbacks stop being proof that you can't and become opportunities to evolve. You learn that the only person who can truly stop you is the one you see in the mirror. This approach also transforms how you view success. Success stops being about surpassing someone else and becomes about unlocking your God-given potential. It becomes a journey of maximizing what you were created to do with the strengths, gifts, and time you've been given. When your purpose becomes personal, your motivation becomes unstoppable. When you commit to being better today than yesterday, your standards rise. You make better choices. You show up with more intensity. You stop settling for thoughts, habits, and environments that keep you small. And slowly, without comparison, without pressure, without judging yourself against anyone else's life, you evolve into someone stronger, wiser, more focused, and more capable than you have ever been. Transformation starts internally, not externally. And this is a truth that many people hear, but very few truly understand. Most individuals look at their life outcomes, finances, relationships, career, confidence, and assume the solution lies outside of themselves. They believe that if the world changes, their life will change. But life is not shaped from the outside in. Life is shaped from the inside out. Your thoughts, beliefs, mindset, and identity are the architects of your reality. If the foundation isn't transformed, the results will never be transformed, no matter how hard you work on the surface. People often search for better opportunities without becoming the kind of person who can recognize and maximize them. They want bigger blessings without developing the character to sustain them. They pray for new doors to open without preparing for what happens after walking through those doors. This is why growth begins within. When your mind expands, your world expands. When your thinking deepens, your results deepen. When your identity elevates, your life elevates. Change on the outside is limited until the person on the inside evolves. Internal transformation requires self-awareness, and self-awareness is uncomfortable. It forces you to examine your beliefs, many of which have been programmed since childhood. It requires facing fears you've avoided and habits you've justified. It challenges the stories you tell yourself about what you can and cannot do. Some people would rather blame their environment, their past, or the people around them than confront the truth that the greatest barrier is often their own mindset. Real change begins when you stop saying, "This is just who I am," and start saying, "This is who I have been, but I am capable of becoming more." Growth begins with permission, the permission you give yourself to evolve. No one else can grant you that. No amount of motivation, coaching, encouragement, or opportunity can override a person who has decided internally to remain the same. Transformation becomes possible the moment a person decides that the old way of thinking is no longer acceptable. Your thoughts create decisions, your decisions create actions, and your actions create outcomes. Yet most people only try to change the outcomes without changing the thoughts that produce them. They want to improve their finances without upgrading their beliefs about money. They want stronger relationships without healing the wounds that sabotage connection. They want success without addressing the insecurity that makes them afraid of being seen. When the root remains the same, the fruit remains the same. Internal transformation also requires learning to challenge your default thinking. Every person has programmed beliefs, some empowering, some limiting. Many people are living in a life smaller than what they are capable of, not because their potential is limited, but because their mindset is. They operate based on old experiences, outdated fears, and hand-me-down beliefs that no longer serve them. Real change occurs when you begin questioning whether your assumptions are still true or whether they are simply familiar. When the inner world changes, the outer world begins to follow. Decisions become stronger, standards rise, disciplines deepen. You stop making choices based on survival and start making choices based on destiny. You stop reacting to life and start directing it. You shift from asking, what can I get, to asking, who must I become? And that shift is one of the most powerful turning points a person can experience. Transformation on the inside also changes how you respond to pressure. Instead of being crushed by challenges, you are strengthened by them. Instead of running from adversity, you use it as strategy and training. Growth teaches you that discomfort is not a punishment, it is preparation. When the internal structure is strong, external conditions matter less. People who grow internally don't wait for perfect conditions. They use imperfect conditions to sharpen their mindset and expand their character. Internal transformation also changes how you see others. When you grow mentally and emotionally, you stop taking things personally. You stop comparing. You stop needing validation. You stop competing with someone else's journey. You begin seeing people with compassion instead of insecurity. When you are secure within, you are not threatened by success around you. You learn to celebrate others because their growth no longer challenges your identity. One of the greatest signs of internal growth is when you stop doing things from obligation and start doing them from alignment. When the mind transforms, your actions shift from forced discipline to intentional purpose. You begin waking up with clarity instead of confusion. You start choosing habits that reflect who you are becoming rather than who you have been. You start building a life based on conviction instead of expectation. People who transform internally also stop waiting for motivation. They realize motivation is temporary, but identity is enduring. When you see yourself differently, you act differently, even on the days you don't feel like it. Most people think lack of success comes from lack of motivation. In reality, it usually comes from lack of identity alignment. When your inner identity matches your outer goals, progress becomes natural, not forced. Internal transformation also produces emotional maturity. You stop being driven by temporary feelings. You learn patience, consistency, and long-term thinking. You stop quitting when it gets hard. You stop expecting immediate results. You realize that everything meaningful takes time, and because the transformation has already begun within, you are willing to walk the path instead of abandoning it halfway. Another powerful outcome of inner growth is confidence. Real confidence, not arrogance, not ego, but the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you are becoming someone capable. External confidence is loud. Internal confidence is quiet. It moves with certainty because it is rooted in the belief that you are developing the skills, mindset, and character necessary for the life you desire. That kind of confidence can't be shaken easily. Transformation from within also affects the way you speak. You stop speaking limitation. You stop declaring defeat. You stop rehearsing failure. Your language begins to match your future instead of your past. You speak possibility, potential, capability, and purpose. Words reflect beliefs, and when beliefs elevate, your words elevate too. And as your words elevate, you start shaping a new reality with them. Ultimately, when the internal structure is renewed, the external results eventually catch up. Some changes happen fast, others take time. But lasting transformation always starts with the decision to renew the mind, to shift the beliefs, and to elevate the inner world so that the outer world can finally align. Your mindset determines your future, and this is a principle that influences every area of life, whether someone realizes it or not. The thoughts you consistently hold create the boundaries of what you believe is possible. If your mind is limited, then your opportunities will be limited no matter how much effort you put in. If your mind is expansive, your world will expand to meet the level of your belief. Most people try to change their circumstances without changing the mindset that produced those circumstances in the first place. And that is why they stay stuck in repeating cycles. A person with a small mindset will often make decisions based on fear, scarcity, and survival. They will avoid stepping into opportunities because they are more focused on protecting what they have than creating what they want. Someone with a growing mindset sees opportunities where others see obstacles. They are future-focused instead of fear-focused. They do not make choices based on their limitations. They make choices based on where they intend to go. The only difference between the two people is not intelligence or luck. It is mindset. Mindset acts like a thermostat. Even if you experience a sudden moment of success, if your inner standard is low, your life will eventually fall back down to the level of your mental setting. That explains why someone can earn more money and still end up broke, or lose weight and gain it back, or find new opportunities and sabotage them. If the inner setting isn't raised, the outer conditions won't stay elevated. Real elevation happens when the mind is lifted first. Your mindset determines what you notice. Two people can walk into the same environment, face the same challenge, or see the same information and walk away with completely different interpretations. One sees impossibility, the other sees potential. One sees a dead end, the other sees an opening. The event didn't change, only the interpretation did. And interpretation is controlled by mindset. Your life is not shaped solely by what happens, but by how you perceive what happens. The mind also influences the standards you live by. A limited mindset accepts mediocrity as normal, excuses as valid, and stagnation as inevitable. A higher mindset requires excellence, accountability, and progress. When your thinking expands, your standards rise. You begin demanding more from yourself. You look at your habits, your choices, your daily actions, and you become unwilling to settle for behaviors that lead to small results. The standard shifts, and everything else begins to shift with it. Mindset shapes your resilience. People with a weak inner foundation are easily shaken by setbacks. They translate failure into finality and challenge into personal deficiency. A strong mindset, however, interprets difficulty as development. It sees resistance as part of the process. It learns, adjusts, and grows. When the mind is strong, setbacks don't stop you, they sharpen you. Life becomes less about avoiding difficulty and more about mastering the version of yourself that difficulty requires. Your mindset also dictates how you respond to opportunity. People with limited thinking hesitate, overthink, and doubt themselves into inaction. They focus on all the ways something could go wrong. Meanwhile, someone with an abundant mindset understands that opportunities rarely wait. They move when the window opens. They build while others hesitate. They leap while others question. The difference is simple. One mindset is trained to protect what it has, and the other is trained to pursue what is possible. A person's mindset influences the kind of environment they build around themselves. People who think small surround themselves with other small thinkers. People who complain, blame, and explain why things can't change. People with expansive thinking intentionally choose to be around others who stretch them, challenge them, and elevate their thinking. They understand that environment is not just where you live. It is what you listen to, who you spend time with, and what voices you allow to shape your beliefs. Mindset also affects identity. If you see yourself as someone unworthy, incapable, or limited, your decisions will be filtered through that identity. You will underestimate yourself, play small, avoid risk, and stay within comfortable boundaries. But when your identity changes, when you begin to see yourself as capable, worthy, and powerful, your actions automatically shift. You begin to behave in alignment with who you believe you are. Identity is the engine that drives behavior, and mindset is the architect that shapes identity. The mind influences your expectations. People with limited thinking expect things to go wrong. They anticipate disappointment. They assume the worst. And because the mind seeks evidence to confirm what it believes, they often find exactly what they expect. Someone with an elevated mindset expects growth, opportunity, and progress. They look for solutions instead of problems. They expect life to open, not close. And because they expect it, they take the kinds of actions that make it possible. Mindset also determines your focus. People who think small focus on what they lack. They count problems instead of blessings. They dwell on the past instead of the future. They are too busy worrying about what might go wrong to see what could go right. A growth mindset focuses on what can be created, built, learned, and improved. Where the attention goes, energy flows, and where the energy flows, results follow. Changing your focus is often the first step to changing your life. Another powerful influence of mindset is on discipline. People often believe they have a discipline problem when the real issue is a mindset problem. Lack of discipline is usually the result of unclear thinking, lack of belief, or identity conflict. When the mindset is strong, when you believe in yourself, your future, and your purpose, discipline becomes less about forcing yourself and more about choosing alignment. You do the work because you see the value in who you are becoming. A powerful mindset also brings vision. When the mind is small, the future is small. The person plans for survival instead of growth. But when the mind expands, vision expands. You begin to dream beyond your surroundings, your past, and your limitations. Vision becomes specific. You begin seeing not just what you are, but what you could be. And once vision becomes clear, action becomes strategic, motivated, and consistent. Mindset determines how you speak. Words are the reflection of belief. Someone with limited thinking speaks limitation. I can't, it's too hard, it'll never happen. Someone with elevated thinking speaks possibility. I'll figure it out. I'm growing. This is preparing me. The language shifts because the beliefs have shifted. And as the language shifts, the reality begins to shift with it. Everything meaningful you desire in life requires the capacity to think at a level higher than the challenges you face. When the mind grows, the world grows. When the mind shrinks, opportunity shrinks. Your future is not controlled by circumstances, background, or talent. It is controlled by the way you think, because your thinking determines your decisions, and your decisions determine the life you build. You don't need permission from anyone to pursue your purpose, and this realization can unlock a level of freedom many people never experience. Most individuals grow up being conditioned to seek approval from parents, teachers, friends, society, and even strangers watching from a distance. This habit becomes so deeply embedded that they delay their dreams until someone validates them. But waiting for permission keeps people stuck in neutral, watching life move forward while their potential sits unused. The truth is that no one else knows your calling the way you do, and no one else will feel your conviction the way you feel it. People who wait for approval often end up living a life someone else designed for them. They pursue careers based on expectations, not purpose. They stay within limits because others are comfortable with them being predictable. They silence their real desires because they fear judgment, criticism, or misunderstanding. The tragedy is not that they couldn't succeed, it's that they never allowed themselves to try. The world will always have opinions, and if you allow those opinions to decide your actions, you give the world power over your future. There will never be a moment when everyone agrees with your dream. There will never be a time when the world unanimously approves of your direction. People may not understand your vision because they were not given that vision. Your calling was placed in your heart, not theirs. Therefore, expecting others to affirm something they cannot see is a guaranteed path to frustration. Vision is often lonely in the beginning. The greatest shifts in history started with someone who looked irrational before they became inspirational. One of the reasons people seek permission is fear of rejection. Humans are wired to want acceptance, and stepping outside the familiar feels risky. But growth always requires risk. Every breakthrough requires stepping beyond the comfort zone. You cannot discover new capacity while remaining in the same mental boundaries that kept you limited before. If fear of rejection controls your decisions, you will live beneath your potential. Rejection hurts for a moment, but regret lasts forever. Another reason people wait for approval is that they underestimate themselves. They believe someone smarter, more experienced, or more qualified needs to validate their path first. But every expert began as a beginner. Every leader started without followers. Every success story once belonged to someone ordinary who decided to move before they felt ready. Confidence is usually the result of taking action, not the prerequisite for it. The person who begins, even with shaky steps, is already ahead of the one who never moves. When you stop seeking permission, you begin operating from conviction instead of hesitation. Conviction gives power to decisions. It makes you act with clarity, even if others can't comprehend what you see. Conviction carries you through challenges because your actions are no longer based on applause. They are based on purpose. The people who change the world are not the ones who seek validation. They are the ones who move forward in silence, trusting that their results will eventually speak. Requiring approval from others creates dependency. Your emotions rise and fall based on who supports you. Your confidence becomes unstable because it depends on external reinforcement. When you learn to approve of your own decisions, you reclaim emotional independence. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop apologizing for your calling. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. You begin standing fully in who you were created to be. Some people will doubt you, not because you lack ability, but because your courage reminds them of the action they never took. When you pursue your calling, you unintentionally hold up a mirror to people who settled. Some will cheer for you, some will resent you. Neither response should dictate your direction. Your purpose must be stronger than their opinion. There will always be people who think you should stay where you are. Some may discourage you to protect you. Others may discourage you because they cannot imagine more for themselves. But the greatest breakthroughs come from those who trust their inner voice more than the outer noise. If you wait for universal agreement, you will wait your entire life. The next level of your life is waiting on your decision, not their validation. Taking responsibility for your direction also means accepting the consequences of your choices. When you rely on others to decide for you, you also give them control over the outcome. But when you choose your path, you develop strength, wisdom, and resilience. You grow through your own experience instead of sitting on the sidelines analyzing the choices of others. Growth comes from action, not approval. When you stop needing permission, you redistribute power. You stop giving others the authority to dictate your potential. You stop living according to expectations that limit your growth. You start building a life that reflects your vision. Your energy shifts from explaining yourself to executing your purpose. People who take ownership of their destiny become unstoppable because they are driven by internal alignment instead of external acceptance. One of the greatest shifts occurs when you realize that people are too focused on their own lives to think about yours as much as you fear. Most of the judgment you imagine exists only in your mind. People are busy. People have their own battles, insecurities, and doubts. Those who criticize often aren't succeeding themselves. Those who are succeeding are usually too focused on building to tear down someone else's dream. When this truth sinks in, the fear of judgment begins to dissolve. Permission is often the barrier between potential and progress. A person can have talent, skill, intelligence, creativity, and opportunity, but if they believe someone else needs to co-sign their dream, they stay motionless. The door to a new future is rarely locked. It is simply waiting for someone to turn the handle without asking if they are allowed to enter. The moment a person realizes they can move without approval, they step into a level of freedom most never experience. Life rewards those who are bold enough to say, I choose myself, not because they are arrogant, but because they finally realize that no one else can walk their path for them. Destiny is personal. Calling is individual. Purpose is internal. And when a person wakes up to this truth, they stop living in hesitation and start walking with intention, direction, and authority. Small thinking creates a small life. And this reality becomes evident the more you observe how people make decisions based on the limitations in their mind rather than the possibilities in their future. When a person thinks small, they create a world that reflects that thinking. They choose comfort over growth, safety over expansion, and familiarity over transformation. Their choices, habits, relationships, and ambitions become shaped by the narrow walls of their mindset. The problem is not that the world is small, it's that their thinking has convinced them that growth is not meant for them. Small thinking leads people to settle, and settling is often disguised as maturity. Many people convince themselves that wanting more is unrealistic, impractical, or unnecessary, not because they truly feel that way, but because they have become afraid of dreaming beyond their current conditions. They convince themselves to stay where they are because where they are is predictable. Bigger dreams require bigger courage, and small thinking does everything it can to avoid the discomfort that comes with change. People with small mindsets tend to focus on obstacles rather than opportunities. Their thinking immediately calculates what could go wrong, how challenging something might be, or why something might not work out. Instead of asking, how can this happen? They ask, what if it doesn't? Because the mind seeks to confirm what it believes, they find evidence to support their limitations. And in time, the limitations they believe become the limitations they live. A small mindset also creates a small vision. Instead of imagining possibilities that stretch them, they only imagine what fits comfortably within their current skills, resources, and circumstances. This restricts creativity, innovation, and ambition. Vision shrinks to match current reality rather than expanding to match future potential. Life then becomes maintenance instead of evolution, and the person spends years tending to a life they never truly wanted but were afraid to outgrow. Small thinking also affects identity. When a person believes they are average, unworthy, or incapable, they naturally make decisions that align with that identity. They avoid opportunities that could elevate them because they do not see themselves as someone who belongs at higher levels. Identity becomes a cage, and instead of breaking out of it, they decorate the bars and call it stability. Yet the truth is this: the moment someone changes their internal identity, their actions begin to change with it. People with small thinking often choose average habits because average habits feel safe. Extraordinary habits require consistency, discipline, and intention. Small thinking seeks the path of least resistance, the easy option, the immediate gratification. But average habits can only produce average results. You cannot think small, act small, and expect a life that is large. The result of a person's life is directly linked to the standards they are willing to enforce on themselves. Small thinking also shows up in the way people talk. Words are the echo of belief. Someone with a limited mindset speaks in limitation. Phrases like, I can't, that's too big. Or people like me never get that kind of chance. Their language confirms their reality before they even attempt to step beyond it. On the other hand, large thinking leads to language that reflects possibility, courage, and openness. When speech changes, direction often changes too. Another consequence of small thinking is that it leads to small goals. Many people set goals not based on what they truly want, but based on what they believe is safe. They aim low because low goals protect them from disappointment. Yet low goals also protect them from fulfillment. When a person raises the size of their thinking, they begin setting goals that demand growth, strategy, and a new version of themselves. Growth becomes the byproduct of pursuing something bigger than their current circumstances. Small thinking also shapes the people a person chooses to surround themselves with. Limited thinkers gather around others who think the same way. People who reinforce excuses, validate mediocrity, and support staying small. They rarely expose themselves to environments that stretch them because those environments challenge their belief systems and force them to confront who they could become. Expanding thinking often begins with expanding environment. People with small mindsets often seek certainty before they move. They want guarantees before they take action. They want the path fully revealed before they take the first step. But growth is rarely guaranteed. Progress happens when a person is willing to walk into uncertainty with faith, strategy, and resilience. Waiting for certainty is one of the fastest ways to stay stagnant. The people who expand their lives are not the ones who had perfect clarity. They're the ones who moved anyway. Small thinking trains people to expect little from themselves. When expectations are low, performance follows. A person who expects little effort, little progress, and little change will never push themselves beyond the level of their belief. Expectations act as internal ceilings. Raise the expectation and behavior begins to rise. Keep expectations low and behavior never has a reason to improve. The future is shaped not by what a person wants, but by what they expect from themselves. Small thinking also leads to small opportunities, not because opportunities are scarce, but because the person cannot recognize them. If the mind is conditioned to believe that great things are not possible, it will ignore or dismiss the very chances that could transform life. The opportunity is not the issue. The lens through which a person views the opportunity is the issue. When the mind expands, opportunities that were invisible suddenly become clear. Another danger of small thinking is that it produces small resilience. When a person has limited thinking, even minor obstacles feel overwhelming. They see setbacks as signs to quit rather than signals to adjust. Someone with expanded thinking understands that difficulty is part of achievement. They expect resistance and they continue anyway. The size of one's mindset determines the size of one's bounce back. Small thinking creates a life of reaction rather than intention. People start responding to whatever comes instead of designing the direction they want to go. They wake up each day simply trying to make it through rather than moving toward purpose. A limited mindset results in limited living. But when thinking expands, intention emerges. A person begins to act, decide, and build with direction instead of drifting through life. Ultimately, a small mindset is a comfortable prison. The door is not locked, but many never walk through it because stepping into a larger mindset requires courage, responsibility, and belief. The moment thinking expands, life begins to expand with it. When a person learns to focus on themselves, they begin to recognize how much energy they have been giving away to distractions, comparisons, and opinions that add nothing to their growth. Most people live their lives with their attention scattered in 1,000 directions, wondering why they feel overwhelmed, uninspired, or stuck. True progress requires concentration, and concentration begins when a person decides that their growth matters more than everything pulling at them from the outside. Instead of chasing after every noise and every voice, they start investing their attention inward where real change begins. Focusing on oneself is not selfish. It is foundational. You cannot build a meaningful life if you are constantly trying to manage, judge, or compete with the lives of others. When your attention is on what others are doing, you lose sight of what you are meant to be doing. Clarity comes when the mind is no longer cluttered with comparison. Once you pull your focus inward, you begin to see what you truly want, what you value, and what you are called to pursue. That sense of direction becomes stronger than the desire to impress or outdo someone else. When a person focuses on themselves, they become more aware of their strengths and weaknesses without judgment. This self-awareness is powerful because it allows them to make decisions based on truth instead of emotion or insecurity. Many people avoid self-reflection because it forces them to confront what needs to change. But the ones who grow are the ones who face themselves honestly and use that information to evolve. Self-focus becomes a source of personal power because the person can finally see where they need to grow and where they are already strong. Focusing inward helps eliminate excuses. When people look outward, they can always find someone or something to blame. Circumstances, competition, timing, failures, or other people's success. But when a person turns their focus inward, they realize that excuses do not move anything forward. They begin to see that their results are connected to their habits, thoughts, discipline, and effort. That realization is not comfortable, but it is empowering. It means they are no longer waiting for the world to change. The power to change is already in their hands. When someone focuses on themselves, their goals become clearer. They stop setting goals that other people expect and start setting goals that reflect their true desires. They stop pretending to want what society tells them to want and begin defining success on their own terms. Clarity is not found by looking at the world. Clarity is found by looking within. When the mind becomes still enough to hear its own voice, direction becomes unmistakable. Self-focus also reduces anxiety. Much of the stress people feel comes from imagining what others might think, say, or judge. When you learn to focus on your own path, the noise fades. External opinions lose their power because your purpose becomes greater than someone else's assumptions. Instead of overthinking how others view you, you begin thinking about how you view yourself. That shift gives emotional freedom that many people never experience because they are too busy living for an audience. Focusing on yourself increases efficiency. Without focus, effort becomes diluted. People work hard but make little progress because their attention is divided. But when someone decides, this is my priority and this is where my energy goes, progress accelerates. They stop chasing every new idea and commit to what matters. Over time, intentional effort produces meaningful results, while scattered effort only produces exhaustion. Personal focus also strengthens discipline. When someone is truly committed to their growth, they begin shaping their environment, habits, and routines around who they want to become. They start saying no to things that waste time, drain energy, or pull them backward. They begin protecting their time as if it were money because they understand that time is the currency of transformation. Discipline becomes easier because there is a clear why behind every decision. When a person focuses on themselves, they become more resilient. Challenges no longer feel personal, they feel purposeful. Instead of seeing problems as proof that something is wrong, they see them as part of the process of becoming stronger. Because their attention is inward, they measure progress not by how smoothly life goes, but by how much stronger, wiser, and more capable they become through difficulty. Resilience grows in the soil of personal responsibility. Self-focus also leads to stronger intuition. Most people are disconnected from their inner voice because their mind is filled with noise from the world. When that noise is removed, intuition becomes clearer. Decisions no longer require endless debate or constant approval. The person begins to trust their own judgment, their own instincts, and their own understanding of the path they are on. That inner confidence becomes a guide more reliable than outside opinions. When someone focuses deeply on themselves, they begin attracting opportunities that align with their growth. Instead of chasing validation or recognition, they become someone who naturally draws the right people, ideas, and environments toward them. People often underestimate how magnetic clarity can be. When you are focused, the world notices, not because you are trying to impress, but because you stand out in a world full of distraction. Self-focus also transforms relationships. When a person knows who they are and what they want, they no longer cling to relationships out of insecurity or fear. They choose connections that support their growth, inspire them, and challenge them to elevate. They stop depending on others to define their value and begin showing up as someone who brings value. Strong relationships come from strong individuals, and strong individuals are shaped by focus. Focusing on yourself builds inner stability. Instead of being moved by every change in circumstances, every shift in opinion, or every unexpected event, you become grounded. Internal strength replaces the need for external reassurance. The person learns to operate from intention rather than reaction. That stability gives them an advantage because they are able to keep moving forward when others are shaken. Personal focus increases confidence. Confidence does not come from perfection, it comes from progress. When a person sees themselves growing, improving, learning, and rising, belief in themselves becomes natural. They no longer need someone to tell them they are capable. They have the evidence within their own actions and evolution. Confidence built from self-growth is stronger than confidence borrowed from others. Ultimately, when someone focuses on themselves, they step into a level of power that cannot be taken away by circumstances, people, setbacks, or opinions. Their life becomes something they are designing rather than something they are reacting to. Through focus, clarity emerges. Through clarity, direction emerges. And through direction, a life built on purpose begins to unfold.